This is my second day in Singapore, and so much has happened that it feels like I've been here many days. It's a wonderful way to visit Singapore as a Buddhist monk. And it's very impressive to see this kind of interest in the teaching of the Buddha and the practice. The religion, any religion can really sink into just being ceremonies and customs and just cultural identities. But and Buddhism being one of the oldest of the existing major religions, some of it can be just merely part of cultural identity, cultural attitudes, which is not, I'm not criticizing that, it's a good identity, and it gives a kind of beauty to any culture that it underlies. But also, the real significance of the Buddha's teaching was it was practical. It wasn't just metaphysical speculations or theological. If you notice in the teachings of the Buddha, they're all pointing. They're pointers, they're not doctrinal positions to take. So you have to believe in this, and prescriptions for behavior that through commandments. The precepts that you received this morning were requested, they weren't commanded by me. And then, like the bhikkhus, the bhikkhu vinaya is such that that we can, if people ask us, we can give them the 5 precepts, but we can't command them to take the 5 precepts. And this is the kind of essence of the Buddha Dhamma. It's about rising up to seeking out. It's not something that is imposed on you through making you frightened, going to hell if you don't behave yourself. And this is why it's so attractive to so many people, say in the Western world, that have lost faith in religion because they see it as just a sense of intimidation or demand on them, and through fear of the next life, fear of death, that they conform to religious doctrine, religious teachings. Now is a time where it's more individualistic, you think for yourself, you form your own opinions and views. And that can lead to, kind of total mental confusion, because the problems of modern society is that there's no boundaries, really moral boundaries for life. It's about do whatever you feel like. And freedom, it's about being free and being an individual and free to think what you want and do what you want. So it has this sense of, I'm free, I can think and do what I want, I'm not bound by religious customs or moral precepts. And the result of that is increasing kind of neurotic problems, emotional, psychological problems that result from not having, you have this sense of being free, but without any wisdom, without understanding the nature of your own body and mind, of the universe that you live in. You're told what it is, maybe you have views from scientific theories or even religious ones, but the fact is that you don't know really. Within the limitation of just having a human body, we can't know everything about everything, and how it all began and how it will end in the future. We can speculate about this, we can have favorite kind of theories about it, and our own preferences. But say at this very moment, while we're sitting here in this hall, think, don't know. What can I know now at this very moment? What is knowable at this moment is that the body's like this, it's sitting posture, and be aware of the breath of this body, inhaling, exhaling. These are natural conditions. They're not fraught with a lot of egotistical values or personal identity. Just sitting is, we're all going to do that, and then breathing is just what the body's doing. So in meditation, like kammatthana, or in training oneself in meditation, it's if you notice, they're all the emphasis is on the here and now, the present moment, the paccuppanna dhamma, the reality of now, because the future, tomorrow, or even later on this evening or whatever, is what you don't know at this moment. You can speculate. It should be, I plan to do this. You hope, you dread, you whatever. But at this very moment, when you're observing, and you're paying attention, is you don't really know. It's possibility, maybe, could be, perhaps, but it's not definite, because the future is the unknown. And this Luang Por Chah, in his years of living with him and listening to his talks, he was always emphasizing this not knowing, which many Western monks found very confusing. Because our society, our culture is about trying to know everything. And and then you think, Luang Por Chah is this enlightened master. He's been practicing for years. He met Luang Pu Man and all that, and he still doesn't know. Or is it not about the sign of not knowing out of ignorance, but not knowing out of wisdom? Knowing, not knowing. That's a different reality, isn't it? Where the ego, the Ajahn Sumedho ego, wants to know all about everything. I used to be a very curious kind of character, and so you want to have answers to questions and solutions to problems. And if you can't make them yourself, then you go to teachers like Luang Por Chah, or you go to experts and scientists and psychologists and people in authority to find out the answers to the questions or solutions to the problems. But in meditation, what we call meditation, or bhavana, isn't about getting answers, but getting familiar with pure conscious awareness, because it's here and now, it's with us. It's not something that you have to get, or something you don't have yet that you hope to get tomorrow. It's just a matter of being awake, aware in the present. Where so much, sometimes we meditate always with the idea that I've got to get something, I've got to get rid of my defilements in order to become enlightened in the future. And you see what I'm pointing at is the sense of I'm someone who's unenlightened, needs to do something now to become enlightened in the future. And this is the thinking process, this is the way we think. This is like the pronoun, I, and me, and mine, and my, and so forth. All these convey the sense of me as this physical form, as this body, as this personality. And so when life operates from this basic delusion, then we experience suffering, because we're deceiving ourselves, and what can you expect? When you have hopes, expectations about the future, you're never really observing the here and now. You're doing something now to get some hopefully good result in the future. And then we might succeed, we might get a good result in the future, but it's not, it's still based on ignorance and maybe a moment, a feeling of success, but it's not enlightenment, it's not sustainable. You can't really keep that for very long, it disappears. So the Buddha taught the 8 worldly Dhammas, Lokiya Dhammas, and Lumpachar was always emphasizing these, because when we talk about the world or the Lokiya, what do we mean? We can mean different. The English word world can be used in different contexts and have slightly different meanings. But so 8 worldly Dhammas is a very good reflection, because it's just taking 8 worldly conditions that we all experience, like we want to be respected and held high in the society, and we hope to achieve that, to be somebody respected, looked up to, admired, envied, or whatever. But we dread the opposite of being rejected, despised, looked down on in the society. So this desire for respect and fear of being rejected is basically human condition for the world. It's a worldly condition. And then the second pair is we all like to make lots of money and become very wealthy, and keep it, not have the banks fail us, and the economy fall apart, and the stock market support and increase our wealth continuously. And then there's also the fear that goes along that of the crash, of the economy failing, of the bank failing, of you losing all your money, and there's a dread of loss, of not being able to keep your wealth and that you depend on for this sense of security. Then there's praise and blame. So we all like to be praised. When people praise us, we smile and say we're wonderful, and I get a lot of praise here in Singapore, so I smile a lot. But if it was blame, I wouldn't smile so much. And blame is what we most dread: being criticized or blamed for things. And so and then there's happiness and suffering. We all want to be happy, and we don't want to suffer. Now, this is what the world is about. And you notice, if you look at all the cinema or the television or any of these, they're all about, success, like sports. Why are people so interested in sports? Because you want your team to succeed and not fail, and you can get excited by sports tend to be excite the mind. So we like that feeling, and then when our team wins, then we feel very happy. And when our team loses, we don't feel very happy. And so this is just to observe this in your own mind is also a form of bhavana, of reflective meditation. Just to be someone who's aware of success is like this. Not that you shouldn't, it's not about criticizing you for feeling happy when your team wins, but it's, inviting us, pointing us to look at, pointing the direction to look at that tendency to feel happy. The happiness of this kind of event depends on the team winning. And then when it loses, then we feel disappointment or anger or whatever. But we can be aware of this in the here and now, and so because these 8 worldly dhammas are about life in general for all of us, really. Even as a Buddhist monk, you're subject to praise and blame, to happiness and suffering, to success and failure. People admire you and praise you, and then they don't like you anymore, and they criticize you. And then you have devotees who worship you, and then they find someone they respect more, and they leave you. and so it goes on like that. But and some things you're successful at, like monasticism, even within the monastic structure, there's kind of, who can chant Patimokkha the best, or the fastest, who can chant it in 30 minutes. Or it can be who can sew robes better, or who had. I found years ago when stainless steel alms bowls started appearing in Thailand. I felt real envy for monks who were getting stainless steel. A great desire to get one myself. And so, just because you're a monk and you give up worldly vanities, your vanity fixes around what is allowed, like your robe, your bowl, your chanting abilities and whatnot. But in this way, it's not to get rid of that, but to use that as a reflection. This is what Luang Por Chah always was stressing, was being aware of what you're feeling. He didn't say you shouldn't feel envy when somebody has a stainless steel alms bowl and you don't. He's not saying you're wrong or bad, that you shouldn't feel that way. It's being to observe it, being envious, feeling envy is like this, and it's not to try to get rid of it, but to see it in terms of what it is. And what it is in the present moment, like envy or anger or feeling of joy when your team wins, is what the Buddha pointed to continuously, relentlessly pointing to all conditions are impermanent. So this is a way of training the mind it's an honest, directive training of the mind. It's not, you're not trying to cover over anything or ignore anything or pretend or get caught in any fixed ideas, but to train the mind to see things in terms of Dhamma rather than in terms of the 8 worldly conditions. Now this is what wisdom is about. When we use the word panya in Pali language, and what do we mean by wisdom? Because there's worldly wisdom, there's streetwise wisdom, there's wisdom about gambling and all kinds of but in terms of the Buddha Dhamma, they translate panya as wisdom, English word. But what is meant by that is this ability to discern. It's not about judging or criticizing. It's not about preferring one thing over another. It's about observing the way things are. And then the Buddha, out of his compassion, made it all quite simple. He simplified the whole lot because we have to live in this realm of sankharas, our bodies, what we see, hear, smell, taste, touch, think, feel, emotional habits, all the endless, countless myriad of changing conditions we have no ability to keep track of. It's impossible. It's like, trying to count all the leaves in the forest. And, you look at where I live in Ratanawan, you think, they've got all of these trees, and you think you spend my life trying to count all the leaves on the trees. It would be pointless, wouldn't it? But he said, I'm giving you a handful of leaves. So you don't, so the handful of leaves you can get perspective on. Like when I hold my hand up, you see 5 fingers. So it's easy to recognize 5 right off. You don't have to, it's not a problem for any of us to see 5 immediately. But if I was Avalokiteshvara with 1,000,000 fingers, I think you'd have a hard time keeping track of them. So I mean, where you start here and then you lose your place and you have to start again. So notice, like the Buddha simplified everything. It's a simplification of the intellectual world, the conditioned realm that we live in, to help us to get perspective on it. And that is like the 5 khandhas, the 6 ayatanas, all these. Sometimes Theravada sounds like an inventory, like, lists of this and that, the 10 of this and the 20 of that. And it's not inspiring in itself. If you want inspiration, you have to talk about love and compassion. But on a practical level, it's very helpful, when you're meditating, when you're developing bhavana, to have these ways of looking at things that are not coming from ideals, from high-minded ideals, but from very simple grouping of things that have a commonality into these 5 categories. Rupa, Vedana, Sanya, Sankhara, Vijnana, in Pali, means the body or the forms. So, they say at this moment we all have a physical body, and it's like this. It's not about whether it's good or bad, right or wrong, but it is like this. And then we have Vedana, we feel, hot or cold, or pleasure, pain, neutral feelings through the body. We have Sanya, we have memory, retentive memory. Sankhara, we have emotions, and then Vijnana, we have consciousness. So notice that this is like this, 5 fingers, 5 khandhas. Doesn't take a great deal of effort to remember that. And then the Buddha says all conditioned phenomena is impermanent. So sape sankhara anicca. So all these 5 khandhas are sankharas. They're not. You differentiate between body and feelings and so forth, but at the end of the day, they're all sankharas. And so mindfulness is to be able to observe sankhara without judging it or attaching to it or rejecting it. When we start judging what we're feeling, for example, is I feel anger and I shouldn't, or even saying what you're feeling is anger tends to make it more than what it is. Because what it is actually is a sankhara. And your relationship to sankhara now is knowing sankhara, not in judging it as anger, greed, hatred, delusion, or whatever. It's in recognizing its presence. And if you are willing to accept its presence in the present moment and just let it be what it is, it naturally ceases. Because all conditions are impermanent. So we don't have to fight and try to get rid of these sankharas, but we... is it okay? But to be able to trust ourselves on this wisdom level, to know sankharas, to bear with them. Some like fleeting thoughts, some are quite subtle and move very quickly. Others are like emotions, can linger and hang around you. But then it takes patience to bear with feelings of anger or fear and whatnot, with this attitude of just letting them be. And that's where we develop patience through being able to endure the emotional habits that arise in our life without being caught in the power of them, without trying to get rid of them or judge them or indulge in them. Now we all have our points where we get lost, you know. They call it when they push the button, you react like this. And I used to tease the British when Mrs. Thatcher was Prime Minister. You know? Yes, so many of them that went on retreats. They could spread metta to a billion Chinese in China. But to Mrs. Thatcher, they couldn't. So it was, I was pointing this out, you know, deliberately, you know, okay, now metta for a billion Chinese, no problem. You don't know anybody there, and they're not threatening your life at this moment. And then you go through, you know, your mother, father, and teachers, and then others. You can't just encouraging people to bring out these perceptions, and then I'd bring in Mrs. Thatcher, and you'd feel this sudden thought in the atmosphere, just kind of tense. But these are, in mindfulness then, is to be able to observe this. You know, if one doesn't have any metta for Mrs. Thatcher, it's like this. It's to see it as a sankhara rather than as some kind of personal defect. Another time, there was a monk giving a metta retreat at Amravati in England, and he was very inspiring when his metta retreats, and he was very popular. And so this woman, English woman I knew quite well, was on this retreat. And in the middle of the retreat, she came out and she was crying, and she came to see me, and I said, "What is the matter?" And she said, "I can't do it, I can't do it." And I said, "Can't do what?" And she said, "Well, I can spread metta, but when he says mother, I can't do it." He says he had problems with her mother. And then she felt guilty, like she should be able, of all people, to have metta for one's mother, is the ideal, you know. That's an ideal. That's not always how we feel. So then I suggested that that she have metta for her, or whatever was going on in her mind, because metta then, or translated as loving kindness, but it's really much more an uncritical acceptance of the way things are. It's not about loving kindness, is more inspiring, but it tends to mislead. We think we have to like people and feel this love for everybody, when sometimes we can't do that. As an ideal, we can subscribe to the ideal, but the reality of it in the present is, right now, I don't love everybody. I hate everybody's like this. And so then the metta then is to accept what you're feeling non-critically, means to let it be what it is. It'll cease on its own. And her problem, I kind of suggested to her, look, your problem isn't, you're very idealistic, you feel you should be able to do this and you can't, and then you feel guilty and you hate yourself, and you think everybody else is able to do it but you. and she, she took in what I said, because you have to, be with the way things are, not the way they should be or the way you would like them to be. At this moment, while we're sitting here in this room, the way it is, I can't tell you how you should feel. Well, I can do it, but that's not going to be what you're actually feeling. And if I come across very strong and tell you how you should feel, and you don't feel that way, then you feel guilty or resentful of me, and you're missing the whole, what's actually happening in the present moment in your own mind, because you're lost in your own ideas and emotional habits. So, but when, at the end of the day, metta is love, in the sense of unconditioned love. It's like love isn't about liking, isn't about, liking something. It's about accepting things as they are. When you really love somebody, you're not, I love you when you do what I want. But when you don't obey me, I don't love you anymore. That's a misuse. That's not metta. But unconditioned love in Christian doctrine, it's called unconditioned love, Christian love. And the English word love is a powerful word, let's face it. It's not to be despised, but it's used for anything, I love McDonald's hamburgers. doesn't mean that doesn't mean unconditional love. McDonald's hamburgers aren't always lovable. So this is just to learn to trust yourself more in your ability to observe, uncritical observer. And in the Thai forest tradition, one thing that really I was attracted to in it was I'd already had insight enough before I met Luang Por Chah into the first two noble truths. I spent a year as a samanera in Nong Khai, up on the Lao border, Mekong River, and there I spent a year in a little kuti all by myself, meditating on the Four Noble Truths. And so I had insight, a lot of insight, when you're left alone by yourself, and and then nobody in this monastery could speak English. I couldn't speak any Thai, and so it was had its problems. But I liked it that way because I mean they were, the monks, the mechis there were very good to me. So they'd bring me food every day, and they were told to leave me alone. You're supposed to be left alone. And then you do this very strict Burmese style, Mahasi Sayadaw style of practice, which I found I could do. What I started with in Bangkok was at a temple in Bangkok. But when you're with yourself 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, nearly 365 days of 1 year, and to move in slow motion. It's impossible. And so I had this book of the Four Noble Truths from Sri Lanka. It was it's not very thick, and it's called The Word of the Buddha. And it was put together by a German bhikkhu, Jnanatiloka, who I didn't know, but he took from the suttas, from the scripture, the necessary teachings around the Four Noble Truths and put them in this reasonable sized little booklet. And so I meditated on that for nearly 1 year. But at the end of the year, I had a lot of insight, but I still question about, no matter how much you try to let go of this sense of a self, no matter, how effort I found anatta quite difficult to I can understand the theory behind it, but the reality of it I didn't quite get. Where anicca was easy for me, but anatta was a real challenge. And then with Luang Por Chah's emphasis on Bhutto, he used this mantra, which I found very helpful because it's the name of the Buddha. It's a kind of mantric chant. Using of the Buddha's name, Bhutto. And so this is very much the mantra of the Thai forest tradition, and most of them use it. And then it's translated into, because that's the Pali form, and then translated into a language called the knowing, the one that knows. And so this emphasizing knowing. The English word to know, knowing is what? Knowing what? And then you realize modern education, most of us are educated through knowing all about things. We go to school, we learn all about science and technology and art and history, homemaking and beauticians and being soldiers, and we know all about techniques that we acquire in the world for worldly success, or knowledge that are fed to us by others. But direct knowing, Buddha actually means to know reality, know Dhamma. And this is like the refuge in Buddha Dhamma Sangha. And that can be just chanted as a ceremony that we do when we have meetings, and we ask the monk to give the 5 precepts, 3 refuges. But as you develop more on the wisdom level, you realize that these 3 refuges are reality. They're not just abstract ideas or ceremonial chants. that actually when you're mindful, when there's awakened awareness, you know there's knowing Dhamma the way it is. It's a direct knowing. It's not believing what the scriptures tell you anymore or what the monk says. It's knowing in a direct way. Consciousness, we're all experiencing consciousness. That's knowing, isn't it? It's when you're not conscious, you don't know anything. And knowing is our what we're doing now is knowing. But we tend to know about. We send the mind always outward to know about things outside, about how far the sun is from the earth and so forth, the changing qualities of the weather in Singapore and so forth. It's just, we know, we can have all kinds of information and knowledge. This is an information age. We're glutted, suffocated with information. And so we know all about all kinds of things that, say, at the time of the Buddha, people didn't know about. They didn't have all the technology or the science and they were illiterate. They weren't, even the Buddha never wrote anything. So this knowing isn't about knowing about things, but knowing all things are impermanent. And so this takes a determination to really observe that, and notice the changingness of your own feelings, physical feelings, pain, or pleasure or pain, or emotional feelings of happiness and suffering, or just how quickly thinking passes through. Suddenly you're aware of a thought just kind of passing through your mind. Maybe it's a thought of no significance. I mean, it can be anything, but it's still a conditioned phenomenon, and it's changing, so it can't stay, you can't keep it. And so that it takes a strong determination to keep at it, till you actually know this. There comes a time, if you keep determining to observe, to be the observer, the Putto, awaken to Dhamma, the way things are, because the way things are is all conditions are impermanent. So you don't have to figure out the way things are, with your brain, with your intellect. You're told, they're all anicca, dukkha, anatta. So it's laid on for you, but just to observe change, impermanence. It's not criticizing impermanence, saying that everything shouldn't be impermanent. It's not saying that impermanence is bad or whatever, but so it's not about judging or criticizing, liking or disliking, but noting, observing. If you do this, then you get more confidence, more certainty in your ability to inform consciousness with wisdom. And this is what, like the Buddha knowing Dhamma, and then Sangha is like one who practices. Supatipanno, Ujupatipanno, these are one who practices. One who does it, who sees it, who has this breakthrough, practicing in the right way, in the direct way. So suddenly the Buddha Dhamma Sangha suddenly mean, to me now, I chant them a lot because I just love those words. If I'm going to think, I might as well think something nice like that. and also it means a lot, because it's so easy, to be pulled out into the worldly dhammas. There's so many things like in a monastery where you hear the grapevine about who the problems at one monastery, or monk disrobing, or some scandal that arises, and you can't help but feel certain emotions arise, and find it all quite interesting, because scandal, gossip is quite interesting. and just the empty consciousness first seems quite boring, because nothing much happening there. But actually the nature of consciousness, what they call in Thai Jit Wan, is or consciousness without attachment, consciousness and non-attachment. That's what the definition of Nibbana. Consciousness and non-attachment. Where consciousness, even a totally crazy person, a maniac, a serial killer, is conscious. and the animal world is all about consciousness. The whole planet, the whole universe is about consciousness. So consciousness then embraces everything. It includes the sun, moon, stars, the crazy people, the good, the saints, the sinners, or the animal kingdom. You have this sense of a oneness, of a completeness, of a wholeness in consciousness that you don't have, you can't feel, except as an ideal, because you can create the sense of oneness with all creatures as an ideal. But the actual reality of oneness is always through non-attachment to conditions. And this is the brilliance of the Buddhist teaching, is it points very directly to that. It's very accurate, these Four Noble Truths, these basic teachings that the Buddha expounded just after his enlightenment. I mean, they're not just theories or doctrines or ideals of how things should be. And that's why the Buddha took suffering, dukkha, as the first noble truth, something ordinary, common to everybody. And so it's, and then put it in, and change it from something we don't want to a noble truth. So what I'm saying then is to change your attitude towards your own sense of despair or anger or worry or whatever, form of dukkha you're experiencing, to being the knower of dukkha rather than the person that's suffering a lot. So when you don't do that, then you become someone who has a lot of suffering. and once you identify with that perception, then you're bound to suffer the rest of your life. Because you've already set the conditions for that event. But now's the time you come here to this Buddhist association, see it as opportunity to practice, to develop, to cultivate. Because it's a complete form, like dana, sila, bhavana. You have, like this morning, you took the precepts, you gave the four requisites, the food, to the Sangha. You asked for the 5 precepts, the dana, sila, and then bhavana. It's a complete path. And dana, sila is a foundation for that path, because dana, sila is a way of developing a sense of self-respect, a sense of joy in life, that you get from not being stingy, selfish, or immoral. So so if if your life is just based on being self-centered and blaming everything and not being responsible for what you do or say in the society, then to develop bhavana it would be impossible. You got too much. You can't get it that way. You can't get it through holding a gun to your head or anything else. You've got to develop a sense of self-respect and respect for the society you're living in, a sensitivity to your family, to the Singaporean society, to the world in general, a sense of being part of it and being something that's good and beneficial to the society, social sensitivity and self-respect. That is a very powerful foundation for bhavana, for cultivating the path. So this, my life really has been quite here, I'll hold it.
No, I didn't.
I like holding things.
Authority.
I've been very fortunate in this life because I could devote it to this kind of practice. And things opened up for me in a way that I never really expected. I became interested in Buddhism when I was 20. I was in the U.S. Navy, and 1955, I was on a supply ship, carried supplies from San Francisco to the American naval bases in Japan. And so I don't know how many times I crossed the Pacific Ocean and so forth. And I was always interested in Asia, and going to Japan was my first experience actually going to an Asian country. And it was there I first encountered Zen Buddhism. This was about 1955. And that kind of something in me responded to that particular style. In those days, there wasn't very much literature in English on Buddhism of any sort. But in the 50s, there was this kind of interest in Zen Buddhism, especially in the San Francisco Bay Area, the kind of beatnik type thing. It was quite like a fad or a temporary fashion. But it opened many things up to many of us who benefited from that time. As I was about 20 years old then, now I'm 80, so that's 60 years. And then from that time on, that's been my major interest. Because I didn't even quite know what to do about it, because there wasn't. I looked for meditation teachers in the States from the West Coast, and even in the early '60s, I was a graduate student at the University of California in Berkeley, studying Indian cultural history, and I'd look around, go to San Francisco or different places, hear of a guru or some kind of meditation teacher, but actually nothing much was happening. And Zen Buddhism, there was, I think Alan Watts was a popular writer about Zen Buddhism. He would give public talks in San Francisco. It was the best you could get. But now you go to Berkeley There's a Zen center, a Vipassana group, they're everywhere. It's now a problem of option paralysis. At the time that I was there, it was just total paralysis. There were no options. So I mean, that's also a sign of the times. Something like just Zen Buddhism, oftentimes on a pop level, not all that profound, to suddenly change your way of looking at yourself and life in general. Because I was brought up as a Christian with a very rigid values. Things were black and white, good or bad, right and wrong, totally fixed, and so it created a lot of feeling of dissatisfaction because something I knew was not right about it, and I didn't know. I thought maybe something was wrong with me. Maybe I was the screw that was loose. But you don't know, and when you're young, what to think. But then this Zen Buddhism was like suddenly a flash. From there on, it's been my main interest. But it changed when I came to Sabah, when I lived with the Peace Corps in Sabah. I encountered, because Zen Buddhism wasn't available in Sabah, nor was Theravada, but I met a Chinese. He was Malaysian from Penang. He was a school teacher at the government school, and he encouraged me to investigate Theravada. So I wrote to Venerable Sri Dhammananda in the Brickfields Temple. This is 1964, and to the World Fellowship of Buddhists in Bangkok, and to the Buddhist Publication Society in Sri Lanka. And so they were quite willing to present me with literature, just pamphlets or whatever. And I pursued, because you're in Malaysia, then the natural place to go if you're interested in Theravada Buddhism is Thailand. So every chance I had, I went Thailand, Cambodia for holidays. And the Peace Corps contract was 2 years. When that was completed, then I went to Thailand and ordained, 1966. So I want to express my gratitude, appreciation for all the generosity, respect that I've received here. And my blessings to you all. May your faith in Buddha Dhamma increase, and so that you have that confidence to break through the realm of delusions that tend to create our unnecessary suffering in our lives.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.